Today we're going to shed some light on the BMW 3 Series and which cars represent the best value for a person looking at buying a used 3 Series BMW. I'm going to walk through the different generations very briefly and express to you the best models available, or at least representing the best value, and some of the highlight models that you could find in those model years. We'll start in the beginning. The E30 generation of 3 Series is the earlier, boxier style, but it is the classic BMW. But the E30 was actually one of the best built, heavily constructed BMWs of all generations. It was a simple car. It was a car that didn't have a lot of electronics. It was a very simple machine. The only downside with the E30 now, of course, because of the age, it is entering that area of classic car. And so a lot of these cars become harder and harder to find, at least in great condition. So again, as I say, these are exceptional cars for simplicity, for driving fun and enjoyment, low cost of getting into, and low cost of maintenance, as well as it's a simple vehicle to work on. If you like to wrench on your own vehicles, the E30 is your car. So here we have the wonderful E30. Well, I gotta tell you, this isn't probably one of the better examples of an E30, but you'll notice the headlights. That's old school E30 here with the little round headlights. They've got the double headlights, the classic BMW grille. Of course, this one's missing the decal. It's a little bit rough. Looks like this guy's converted this to a race car. But basically, there's your E30. You'll notice the big back window, Hofmeister King. We've got the back end, old school kind of bumpers. You know, that's the classic, you know, for the 80s, that was just the look. Taillights, very simple. But it was a simple car, and for that reason, a lot of people liked the E30s because they were simple. And obviously in this case, you probably didn't even have to remove much of the interior to convert it to a race car. So beautiful little car, very, you know, kind of traditional looking and simple, and very cost effective to buy one of these cars. So the E36 is the next generation, and that came out early 90s, 92-ish. And that car had several different variations. You could get the 318, you could get the 325, you could get a 320, which was an inline six as well. And they were all actually very good cars to drive. As a matter of fact, I owned a 320 with the inline six cylinder. Now, the one thing I would comment is, although the engines are great and they're easy cars to drive and relatively simple for maintenance, they aren't without their faults. And the biggest thing that I found with the E36 generations are the quality of fit and finish. I had several things break on me. Windows that came off the racks, trim come apart, like the controls and the trim around your door handles to exit the car. Door handle trim came off. You had stereo issues. And as a matter of fact, one of my corners on the rear suspension broke a spring and collapsed the rear suspension. So they aren't without their fault, but they are a very economical way to get into BMW motoring, and they are sort of that bridge into the new look, the new generation, and the new styling of the BMWs in the 3 Series generations. We have the E36. So here's another example, but this is the 318 Ti. You'll notice the hatch, it's kind of chopped off quickly at the back, but that is the E36 generation. Probably not one of the better models of the E36, but they definitely have a following. And as a matter of fact, this looks like the car I owned. I actually owned a purple 318 Ti like this back in the day. So this actually could be my car. It looks like many years later I've sold it, so this could actually be my car. But there's the E36. You'll notice you've still got the dual headlights, but the front bumper now is a lot more, you know, a little bit cleaner looking from the E30. You know, of course, a little bit of flare on the front, like that. You know, the mirrors are a little cleaner. And then as you move around to the back end of these cars, obviously this is the 318 Ti, so it's kind of chopped, but the taillights are a little bit, again, an evolution, right? And the rear bumpers, again, just like the front bumpers, are a little cleaner. The big distinctive thing on these, on the E36, where I think it evolved dramatically, was the whole look of the rocker. The rocker actually had a bit of a flare to it now, and that to me was more distinctive on these cars than you found on the E30. Otherwise, you ignore that, and largely this is very much a similar car. Like I said, it's that bottom rocker. The drivetrain was improved. but essentially that's E36. So now we'll move on talking about the E46. And the E46 was a slight evolution from the E36 in the sense of styling. And there wasn't a large change in a lot of the body looks. The overall structure and style looked very, very similar, although it was a little more rounded off and a little bit more up to date. Now the E46 had some vast improvements. You had the models like the 325s, 328s, and the 330, which coincidentally was the best of the natural lineup of the BMW 3 Series cars in that generation. It then also had the E46 M3, which had some fit and finish related issues, but it was a vast improvement over the E36 M3, which was known to have some internal engine issues like oil pumps that become unfastened and created catastrophic failures. The E46 moved along and created a much better M3. The rear subframe was an issue, but aside from that, the engine was amazing and the exhaust note was phenomenal, and it just made the hairs on your arms just stand up. So overall, the E46 was really a move in the right direction. As well, if you can find one of the really rare models, there was a ZHP, the performance package that you could add to a 330. Those models are very rare. And if you can find a ZHP, there are actually a small niche group of people that really specially love these cars, and there's a small following and a gathering, and you can actually join forums specifically for the ZHP group. Some people feel that it's just an option, but other people feel that no, it makes the car actually quite special. So the E46 was a great generation of cars and moved BMW along, and you can get into those cars very, very affordably, as a matter of fact, for some of the nicer cars even. Here, the E46, and if you can see, if you take a look at the E46, you'll notice the front spoiler is a lot nicer than the E36. So this is a drastic change. The headlights are a lot cleaner on this. This is a very nice example, actually, by the way, of an E46. Look at how clean the headlights are. Very, very crystal clear. They might even be new. But look at this front. So they've cleaned up a little bit. They've simplified the rocker on these cars. This is a two-wheel drive, a coupe, of course. And again, look at the taillights, a small evolution from the previous generation. This one here is a 325 Ci. 325, again, is easily one of the most reliable BMWs, 3 Series BMWs that you can buy. It's the 325. Of course, I would buy the 330, but this is also a very, very nice example of a BMW to drive. It'd be a lot of fun, and it would be relatively reliable to drive. I happen to have a good friend that had one of these, and we would go rip around, and honestly, it is surprising how well this car handles the CI, the 325 Ci. Like, this car actually handles like it's on rails. I was really, really surprised. This thing out handles, I had a Porsche 930, and this thing actually did better than that. Now, you'll notice the handles, very, very clean. That's a nice upgrade from the previous generation, from the E36. The handles were very kind of nasty. They were sort of kind of flush mounted, but they were a cheaper look. This is a cleaner, more of a higher quality looking handle on there. Mirrors upgraded. Now they've got these vents on the hood. That's a little bit different. I'm not sure if I love it or hate it. I guess what it does is it sort of breaks up that whole oversized hood look. But again, here's your traditional kidney grills, BMW symbol. Great cars, the E46. And then after the E46, we moved into the E90 and the E92, which represented a whole vast change of vehicles. We're talking about in the mid 2000s, all of a sudden you saw different cars. You had 323s, 325s, 328s, 330s, and now a newly introduced for BMW in the day is a 335 that happened to have dual twin turbochargers, and it produced similar power numbers that you would expect normally, typically out of the M3 model lineup. The 335 had a whole host of new technology. It was a fast car. It was spectacular to drive. The only problem is it also had a lot of maintenance related issues, and we could cover that in days to come in future videos. But the 335 was a great performer, if not lacking in some of the reliability factors. Now, also in the E90, that also represents the best of the M3 generation, and arguably even to date, including the newest generation, which went back to a straight turbo 6 engine in the new M3. But the E90 that we're talking about, and E92 with the M3, the 4-liter V8 engine in that generation, was one of the best, arguably the best M3 of all time. It had a high revving 8,250 RPM redline. It was really, really fast. Yes, it had rod bearing problems, but all in all, it was easily one of the best M3s of all time. You could get it in an SMG, or later on it came equipped with a DCT, so a dual clutch transmission, one of the early generations. Or if you're a purist like myself, you can always appreciate a good manual 6-speed gearbox. So that was also available. The E90s had a whole host of different models, and it was an exciting time in the BMW world in that mid-2000s up to, you know, the 2012-13 era, where things started to change again. This is the E90 generation. This particular car, you can see, has evolved a lot. This, obviously with the headlights, you know, is a vast improvement even from 2 generations. So you had the E36, the E46, and then to the E90. Evolved quite dramatically between 2 generations. But looking at this car, look at the front spoiler, a lot nicer already compared to E36. And again, the side end. Now the rockers are a lot simpler on this car, but this is not an M. This is a pretty standard machine here. We'll work our way around to the back. Again, taillights a lot cleaner than you would typically find on the previous generation on the E36. Now we've got the E90. Look at the generational taillights, much cleaner. The rear bumper's smoother. This, of course, is the 325, and arguably one of the best, one of the most reliable 3 Series BMWs of all time. Unfortunately, that's sort of ironic, as there's a tow hook connected to it, so obviously this thing died for some reason. But again, you know, it's mechanical, so everything will and can fail. But this is actually easily one of the most reliable BMW 3 Series cars of all time. It's the 325i. Very simple, fun to drive, but very reliable right there. And that brings us to the last generation of the 3 Series BMW, and that is the F80. And that ran from about 2015 until current. Now that's a great machine because BMW brought back a straight 6 engine, strapped on twin turbos on the M version, and all the other cars really were just finely fettled, and actually the entire lineup was tuned up nicely. As a matter of fact, the DCT was incorporated in a lot of the cars as well. And overall, this 3 Series was a nice evolution, a further evolution. And styling-wise, it's definitely very current. But the prices are still too high to suggest good value on the used car market at this time. So time will tell. As well as reliability, we're not entirely sure yet what the F80 looks like 10 years down the road from now. And we have the beautiful F80 M3. You'll notice the beautiful headlights on there, the blacked out grille. It's got the aggressive front spoiler, which is awesome. Look at this, black wheels to match the car. It's basically murdered out. That car looks stunning, right? That is an amazing car, the F80. But it comes at a price. Fancy mirrors. Awesome car. Look at the quad exhaust tips on these cars. M3, everything looks a lot more squared off here. Look at the back end, square. Carbon fiber roof. So what I'm going to do now, everybody, because I know you guys trust my opinion on a lot of these matters, I'm going to give you my best, my picks of each generation, that if I were shopping for a used car, what I would buy. So let's start with the E30. Easily, without question, the E30 for me, just because of its simplicity, but yes, latest generation, highest performing car outside of the M3. Now, if you can find the M3, that's the car to have. But because it's very rare, it's very expensive now, and it's very collectible, it's good luck in finding one. I would say for the mainstream, very difficult to get your hands on, and not recommended in the sense of value. Sure, all cost aside, the M3 is the car to have, but outside of that M3, which is really cost prohibitive for a lot of people now, the 325 IS is my favorite car. You get that? It's a nice nice manual gearbox, a very simple car, but it has 208 horsepower, and that is far more than you need in a simple little car like the early generations of the BMWs. Now, if we talk about the E36 generation, goes to the E36 M3. Now, the Euro version had up to 316 horsepower, while the US version only had 240 horsepower. Either way, the car was a beast and it was a ton of fun to drive. And now, because you can get those cars for $10,000, $8,000 to $10,000 is not uncommon to find them in that price range. It represents actually a really good purchase on the used car market. Just make sure you get a model, a version of that M3 that has been well looked after and that it holds up well. Overall, it's an experience that you really need to try. So the next generation, the E46, what are my picks on the E46? Well, without question, my picks go to either one of two, and depending on what your flavor is. So I'll leave the two options. And so on one hand, if I'm just thinking of a car that I want that to have a very reliable car that's fun to drive and will give me minimal problems, I'm going to definitely buy the 330i. That's the car. Don't get the ZHP because you're going to pay a little premium for that. It's a great car, but in terms of value, the 330i is a great car, and that's probably my top pick. Now, for me, if I'm not worried about value and I'm willing to spend a few more bucks and I'm less worried about reliability, I am without question going to arguably one of the best M3s built of all time, surely on exhaust note and the driving experience. Definitely want to get that 333 horsepower M3 with the manual gearbox. Do not buy it with the SMG. That SMG gearbox was slow and certainly not even as refined as the E60 M5s, which was poor, by the way. This was even worse. So stick with the manual in the M3 of the E46 generation. Then we move to the E90s. Now, talking about the E90s, my favorite pick of the E90s are going to go, and I didn't even mention this before, but it actually goes to the 335D, not the I, the D. Now, what that is the inline turbo diesel engine that is also shared in the X5 diesel, which coincidentally I own. I own that X5 diesel. Why? Because I've done the research, and sure, it's not the most reliable. However, it has great power and its fuel economy is exceptional. If you can get around the reliability factor, price-wise, they're reasonable, and certainly performance, you'll have no concerns. So my number one pick in the E90 generation is the 335D, and of course an E90 M3. Those are my two picks. Of course, the M3 being substantially more money. Here where I live, you can pretty much expect to pay $30,000 to $40,000 for a nice used version with reasonable miles. I can't seem to find anything closer to 20K. At least where I live, there's nothing in that price range. You're really looking at 30 grand plus. So that's why if you're looking for something slightly more economical, I would go with the 335D. If you've got extra money, certainly the M3 is your car. And then my pick on the F80, we're talking about the latest generation of the BMW 3 Series, would have to go likely to the M3. Yes, there's other options like get the 340s and such. So you really want to get a manual gearbox F80 M3. Even though it's a lot of money yet, that's my pick. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that list. Mark here again signing out. Make sure you check out my channel a little more, dig deep. For sure, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to share the video. And, of course, subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you back real soon, guys. See you then. Bye-bye.